Hi, I'm Dee with Modesty Matters. We're a business dedicated to providing products for modest-minded families. Today I'm going to teach you how to make this adorable pioneer dress. And then in our next lesson, I'll teach you to make the coordinating apron. Now the first thing we're going to do is print out and assemble our patterns. Now our patterns are all numbered, 1, 2, and there's our collar pattern. Now if it's a larger pattern, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Our patterns overlap, and our four-way arrows are there to help you line up the patterns. As you can see, the arrow underneath and the arrows up above, and that lines up our pattern perfectly. So let's tape that in place and trim it to size. Now the first thing we're going to cut out is the skirt to our dress. Alright, the first thing we're going to cut out now is the skirt to our prairie dress. Here I have my pattern, and I have my material laid in such a way that the fold is up against me, and way over here is the selvage. Now I'm laying my pattern on the fold. That means this part right here that says place on fold, do not cut, I'm going to lay against that fold. I'm going to pin this in place, and then I'm going to cut all the way around like this and stop here. I'm not going to cut along that fold. Okay, now that I have my piece cut out, I'm going to do the exact same thing again on another piece of fabric. Remember, I'm placing this along the fold, and I'm not going to cut there. Now, I'm going to assemble the rest of my pieces. To cut these out, I have my material laid out with the fold close to me again, and the selvage over here. Now I'm going to take it, and I'm going to fold it over again. Just like that. I'm going to cut out my next two pieces in this manner. I'm going to take my yoke and I'm going to lay it right up against the fold where it says do not cut, place on fold. And I'm going to pin that in place. Now I'm going to move my piece down because I need altogether 4 of these pieces. And I just cut 2 out, so now my next 2 are going to be cut out in the same way with this placed against the fold and cut all the way around and stop here. Point out, I cut out both the front and the back yoke. The next pieces we're going to cut out are the sleeve pattern, and again my material is doubled over twice. So I'm going to take our piece and I'm going to lay it against the fold where it says place on fold, do not cut. I'm going to pin it in place, cut, cut, and stop. And this is going to give us both sleeves. Okay, now I need to point out that our collar has the arrow going this way, so we're not able to cut it out against the fold like this, especially if your material is at all directional, meaning that it all goes in one direction as opposed to being random like this is. So what we're going to do is take the fold over here, selvage over here, and I'm going to fold my piece of material just like this, and I'm going to place it against the fold here. I'm going to cut it out here, and I'm going to move it over, and I'm going to cut it out here again. That's going to give us all 4 of the pieces that we need. Okay, now that we have all of our pieces cut out, we're going to work on our yoke and our collar first. To do that, we're going to place our pieces out like this. Here's all 4 of our collar pieces, and I'm going to place them right sides together. These are the right sides, the pretty sides. And this one too, right sides together. Here are my yoke pieces. Again, right sides together and right sides together. Okay, now that I have my shoulder seams pinned, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to line up the very edge, this very raw edge up with this line right here that says 5/8 inch up here. See the 5 and the 8 way up here? I've lowered my presser foot now. I've come way out here to this knob and I've turned it, which brings my needle down. Now this is called needle down position. To begin every seam, I'm going to take a couple of stitches forward, stop, and I'm going to go a couple stitches backwards, stop, and then resume the seam all the way through. At the end of the seam, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stop, and I'm going to reverse, and I'm going to go forward again. Now this locks that stitch in place very nicely. This gives you a really nice, secure beginning and end to every seam. Okay, now we're going to do this for all 4 shoulder seams. Now I'm going to just set these pieces aside and we're going to work on the collar. Again, with our right sides together, I'm going to pin my collar pieces all the way around this outside curve. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to straight stitch these at 5/8 inch all the way around this outside curve. Again, I'm going to start my seam, reverse, and continue on at 5/8 inch. Now I always remove my pins as I sew. This will keep you from breaking a needle. Now that we've straight stitched our collars, we're going to go back and we're going to trim right up next to the stitch line, maybe leaving about 1/4 of an inch or less. Be very careful not to cut through our stitch line. We'll do that on both of the collar pieces. Here we have both of our collar pieces stitched and trimmed. And I'm going to take these now to the iron. What I'm doing now is simply pressing these pieces and then turning them right side out. I'm going to take something and make sure that I can push the seam out as far as it'll go without cutting through. I'll take the iron now and I'm going to press. Now pressing means I put the iron down and I just wiggle it back and forth. I'm not ironing like I would do perhaps a pair of slacks. Now I've finished our collar pieces and I'm going to set those aside. We're going to take our yoke pieces and we're going to press open these shoulder seams. We'll just press open all 4 of the shoulder seams. Alright, now I'm going to lay one of my yoke pieces facing me, with the pretty side facing me. I'm going to take the collar piece and I'm going to pinch it exactly in half just to find the very center of that. Now I'm going to lay that down right over that shoulder seam. And I'm going to pin that in place right there. I'm going to take the other piece and I'm going to pinch it to find the center and I'm going to place that exactly over that shoulder seam again and I'm going to pin that in place as well. Now I'm going to pin this collar in place all the way around the neckline. Now that I've pinned this all the way around, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and do what's called a basting stitch. That's where I simply go as closely as I can to this raw edge all the way around. This stitch is never meant to be seen when the product is all done. It's simply to keep it in place for right now. Okay, again I start with my needle down position. And I want to point out that when I sew, I have a hand here and I usually have a hand right here. Now this allows me to have a lot of control of the fabric as I sew. Again, if you ever feel out of control, simply stop and slow down. Again, with this being a basting stitch, I'm going pretty close to that raw edge all the way around this neckline. Great. Now I've basted all the way around. I'm going to take that other yoke piece and I'm going to sandwich it. What I'm going to do is I make sure I line up those shoulder seams and I'm going to pin them in place. And then I proceed to pin all the way around that neckline. Here we have our piece pinned all the way around the neckline with the collar inside. Remember now, we basted the collar inside this very close to the edge. So when we do that 5/8 inch stitch all the way around the neckline, it's not going to show from the outside. Starting a needle down position, and I usually start just behind that shoulder seam. I'm going to take a few stitches forward, a few stitches backward. And I'm going to very carefully go all the way around that neckline. The final thing that we'll need to do to the yoke now is to take our scissors and to clip notches all the way around this neckline. Now anytime you have a severe curve, you're going to need to do this in anything that you're sewing. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting these notches, but I'm being very careful not to cut through the seam that I just put in. If you clip through that seam, you'll need to go back and reinforce it. I have notched all the way around this neckline. I'm going to take this to the ironing board and I'm going to just lightly press over this before I turn it, and that is called setting the seam. I'll do it on the other side over here. Here we have our collar, and I'm going to go around and I'm just going to press that in place now. Here we have our front and our back. I typically leave a little bit more space in the back than I do in the front. Now the next thing we're going to do is take out our big dress pieces. Now we're going to take our dress piece, we're going to open it up just like this, and we're going to need to gather it. This is how we do that. Take a nice big needle and double thread that's knotted at the end. I'm going to start right here. Now this is going to be part of our underarm. So I'm starting right here, and I'm going to take very long, loose stitches. Go all the way across this until I get to the other underarm. You can see I'm just feeding that on the needle, in and out loosely. Very, very loose stitches. Now here we have it. I've taken this all the way across that curve, and I've stopped at the other underarm. Now you can simply pull the string over here and see how that gathers so nicely. Now you're going to have a lot of control over this. That's a wonderful thing when it comes to gathering. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to take my yoke piece. I'm going to find the center, and I'm going to find the center of this. Make sure you have your right sides together. That means the collar. This has become the right side now. And I'm going to place this on the very center of my skirt that I'm gathering, and I'm going to pin it in place right there. I'm going to take the very edge of my yoke now, and I'm going to take it over to where this underarm part begins, and I'm going to pin it again there, right there. Take the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm now going to loosely, carefully make my gathers how I want them. Use as many pins as you'd like on this. I'm going to get my gathers just how I want them, and then I'm going to stitch this in place. Now remember, you can pull from both sides. You don't have to pull only from the side that the needle was on. You can get your knot, and you can pull from the side of your knot as well. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to straight stitch this at 5/8 inch. Right, in needle down position, I'm going to start stitching, and I'm going to go very slowly because I want to make sure I have the ability to gather just as I would like to all the way along the way to keep things nice and even. Now that we've finished our beautiful gathering, so even all the way across, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to clip that, and I'm going to pull that thread all the way out. Knot it up, and I'm going to use it on the other skirt, because we need to do the exact same thing on the other side of our dress. Now I'm going to pin this exactly in the middle. Again, right sides together. Take this edge of the yoke and I'm going to come all the way over here, and I'm going to pin it. And I'm going to take it all the way over here, and I'm going to pin it right here to this edge. Now notice I still have that underarm little flap left over. I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to just gently pull it so that I can have the gathers exactly where I need them to be from pin to pin. Then I'll go to the other side and I'll pull it from that pin to pin very gently, getting my gathers exactly where I want them to be, and then I'll just pin them in place just like that. Next I'll take it to the machine and I'll straight stitch all those gathers in place at 5/8 inch. Okay, now I'm zigzag stitching right along that raw edge. That's going to give me a really nice sturdy seam, and it's going to keep our material from fraying. Look at all those beautiful gathers. It also gives us a nice finished look from the inside. Alright, now I have the inside of my dress. I'm showing you here. I have this zigzag stitch, I have the straight stitch, and we have our beautiful gathers, of course. I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to press this seam up. Now this does two things. It sets the stitches, and it gets this piece where it needs to be for us to do our top stitching, which I'm going to show you next. Now top stitching is just like it sounds. We're going to stitch right along the top of our dress here. This stitch is meant to be seen. It's going to catch this flap that we just pressed up along the back. And I'll show you how we do this. Now for this seam, we are not going to try to follow 5/8 inch. We're just going to try to go right along the edge of this as closely and as neatly as possible. And I really encourage you to slow your machine down, to go nice and slow, and follow that seam all the way along. This way your product will be nice and neat. Here's where we are so far. We've put our top stitching on. Now the top stitching does several things. It really makes this a much sturdier seam along here. Honestly, if you just sewed this stitch along here, at some point it would be coming undone. So this top stitching seam makes this a very sturdy seam and spreads out where the tension on the seam would be. Alright, now that we've finished our top stitching, we're going to move on to our sleeve. For the sleeve, you're going to need 3/8 inch elastic and a hem ruler. Now the very first thing I'm going to do is take my sleeve and my hem ruler, and I'm going to turn my sleeve in 1/4 of an inch all the way across here, and I'm going to press that in place just like that. 1/4 of an inch. Now that I've pressed up my 1/4 inch, I'm going to turn my piece again, and I'm going to set my hem ruler at 2 inches, and I'm going to press 2 inches all the way across. I'm going to do the exact same thing on both sleeves now. Alright, now that I've pressed this in place, I'm going to pin it, And then I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to straight stitch right along this inner edge. Starting from needle down position. And I'm going to stitch rather slowly so that I can stay right along that inner fold. Okay, now because our elastic is 3/8 inch, we are going to measure 1/2 inch below this seam right here. And we're going to mark it all the way across. And what I'm lining my little arrow up here with is not the edge of the fabric, but is actually the stitch line. This is because we want our opening to be exactly 1/2 inch to accommodate our 3/8 inch elastic. Alright, now I have my line drawn here, and I'm going to straight stitch right along that line, starting in needle down position. And I'm going to go rather slowly again. Alright, what we have just done is form a casing for our elastic. We're going to take our 3/8 inch elastic, enough to comfortably go around the wrist of the little girl or the lady that you're sewing for. Make just a touch, just a little bit more, because it is going to overlap on the edges. I'm going to take 2 safety pins. One I'm going to pin the elastic with right here, and that's right below where our casing is. The other one I'm going to put in the very end of our elastic, just like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert that into that casing. You see? And I'm going to push and I'm going to pull. I'm going to push that safety pin in there, and you can feel that with your fingers. This is a very easy way to put elastic into a casing. I'm going to push and I'm going to pull. And I'm going to continue doing this all the way until that safety pin comes right out the other end. Here it comes. There it is. There, now we've successfully fed our casing with that elastic. I'm going to take a pin now and I'm going to pin that elastic in place, just like this. I'm going to remove that safety pin, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing, but before I pin it, I want to check, I want to feel along and make sure that I haven't twisted that elastic along the way. You want that elastic to be flat, and I have not twisted it. So I'm going to pin again on this side. On both sides I've pinned that elastic in place. I'm going to take this to the machine now, and I'm going to go back and forth along the edges of this, right here and right here along that elastic, and I'm going to secure that in place. Now this is a nice basting stitch. Now we're going to be stitching real close to the edge because all we're doing is basting this elastic in place. Stop and get that pin. And I'm going to reverse, go forward, reverse again, go forward, just a few times just to get that securely in place. Good job, you did the elastic casing for your sleeves. And these add so much to the outfits. The next thing we're going to do is put our sleeve on our dress. Now we're going to put our sleeves on. And what I've done is I've taken my sleeve and I folded it exactly in half. I just put a little crease there so I can find the very center. We're going to put right sides together. See, here's my collar. That's the right side. Then I'm putting my sleeve right side down on top of this, and I want that crease that shows where the middle is to line up exactly with that shoulder seam. I'm going to pin that in place. There we go. Now I'm going to take the edge of my sleeve and I'm going to bring it all the way over here to to that underarm flap. I'm going to pin it right there. I'm going to take this one over and I'm going to pin this one to that underarm flap. Now this is how you're going to make your sleeves puffy. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from that seam to 1.5 inches on this side. I'm going to put a pin here just to leave as a marker so I know where I want my puffiness and my gathers up on top of my sleeve to start. The rest of this I'm going to smooth along here. I'm going to stop right there. Take that pin out, pin it right there. Okay, see that big flap? That's supposed to be there. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Starting at where that center seam is, I'm measuring 1.5 inches over, and I'm putting a pin there to leave as a marker for the moment. And I'm smoothing that sleeve right up like this. Pin out, and I'm pinning it in place right there. Show you what I've done. This is smooth. There's a big flap, the pin that shows the center seam, another flap, this pin, and it's smooth here. So smooth, flap, pin, flap, smooth. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to straight stitch at 5/8 inch right along here. Alright, starting in needle down position. Start and back up. I'm going to go rather slowly again. Okay, now we've come to the first flap. This is what I'm going to do. We're going to do something called finger gathering. I'm going to lift that presser foot. I'm going to press with my fingers some gathers in here. So there's going to be gathers from where that pin was to where the next pin comes with my fingers. I'm going to lower the presser foot. That's what this is the presser foot. And I'm going to hold those in place while I stitch. Pull that pin out. Right, I'm going to pull this pin out. And again, now I'm at the other flap. Again, I'm going to raise the presser foot. And I'm going to just take with my fingers and I'm just going to make some little gathers. Just evenly coming up to where the next pin begins. You've done it. Lower my presser foot and I begin stitching again. Alright, now you've done the gathering, the rest is easy. Now I just straight stitch all the way the rest of that underarm of that sleeve. Now that I've put that seam in, I'm going to come back and I'm going to go right along the raw edge with a zigzag stitch to finish the seam. Now we're going to do the exact same process on the other sleeve. There, look how sweet those sleeves have turned out. And that was just simply with doing finger gathering. Alright, now we're going to take our dress and we're going to turn it wrong side out. What I'm going to do is stitch all the way from the wrist, this whole sleeve, to the underarm, and then pivot and go straight on down the dress. But first, I'm going to pin. To do that, I'm going to start at the very edge here. We want that to turn out really good. And I'm going to move on here and I'm going to make sure my underarm seams line up perfectly. and then I'll pin right on down the side of this dress. Now from here we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to straight stitch at 5/8 inch beginning at our wrist. Now position, I'm going to straight stitch. Right over that elastic, which I have pinned. Now when I come to that underarm seam, I'm going to take my material and I'm going to lift my presser foot and I'm going to pivot just slightly. And I'm going to continue stitching. I'm going to go straight down the side of that dress. Stopping to adjust, of course, occasionally. Alright, now that I've straight stitched the entire side seam, I'm going to go back and I'm going to zigzag stitch right along that raw edge. Starting a needle down position. And I'm going to do the exact same thing all the way down the other side of our dress. Now that we've sewn our side seams, we're going to finish our dress with the hem. To do that, I'm going to set my hem ruler at 1/2 inch. I'm going to take my material and I'm going to fold it up and I'm going to press it in place all the way around 1/2 inch. Once I've completed that, I'm going to set my ruler at 1 inch. I'm going to fold my piece up again. I'm going to press and pin it in place this time. And I'm going to do that all the way around the dress. Now our final step on our dress is to straight stitch right along this inner fold all the way around our dress, starting at the side seam. And I'm going to go all the way around the dress. And here it is, our completed Pioneer dress. Good job. Join us in the next lesson where I'll teach you how to make our Pioneer apron. And don't forget, check out our how-to kits to make the mop cap, our bonnet, the bloomers to complete your look.